Hey fam, welcome to Simplexity, a podcast that we take seemingly complex matters and attempt to make them plain and simple. You thought I got a little rusty, didn't you?
No, I didn't think so, but I did think that you were going to say, welcome to season 3 of
Well, I was
Simplexity.
going to say that next.
Well, go ahead then.
Welcome to season 3.
See?
Brand new digs.
I know. I wore my green shirt in honor of our green.
What a miss. What an
miss.
epic miss.
It was intentional.
You should have popped off the green, not blended into it.
Sorry, I didn't wear a white undershirt for the season 3 opener.
What's that supposed to mean? This is season 3, Boots.
I know.
Feels good. We're in a new studio, new space, new table, ready for guests.
Yeah, let's go over the clues that we mentioned in the shorts. Remember? So
I
we
do.
said
I do.
Style. I mean, come on.
We upped our style.
Big round was my clue for this table.
That's right.
What else do we have?
Room.
Room. Yeah, because we're in the
And then the last one was
shining.
Shining. Good
Yep.
place. So now if you were wondering, losing sleep over it, now you've probably put it all together, and
Yeah.
all of that was supposed to speak to a brand new space so that we could spread out a little bit, a little
Yeah.
more pleasing to the camera.
Yeah, if you're just listening, I would recommend at least open up YouTube and just see what we're talking about, and then you can go right back to audio
right,
if you want.
right, yeah.
But we got Becca in the studio and
The one and only Mike Hughes,
Mr. Mike.
the camera magician
Yeah,
here.
he's doing card tricks.
He does incredible things. He even makes you look good.
That was just plain rude.
Oh, but we're going to start off with a hot topic today.
Yep, we are.
Tell me about it.
So we're talking about cancel culture.
I love it.
It's a hot button issue. It's one that a lot of people are talking about. I think it's going to take an interesting spin today, perhaps.
You do?
I do.
Okay. Do you know where cancel culture originated from, when it became a mainstream word?
I think it's fairly recent, but no, I don't have a specific.
Oh, it is not. Oh,
It's
no.
not recent?
No, it is not. It is more rooted in the African American culture, and it found its sort of notoriety in a movie called New Jack City.
Wow.
Wesley Snipes was the star of New Jack City. This talked about the whole the city sort of captured the beginnings of the cocaine sort of rise when cocaine morphed into crack. New Jack City was a movie that captured sort of the gang-related sort of nature of how it was dispersed throughout New York City. That was sort of like the epicenter of where crack sort of got the big jump, like it needed to jump.
Got its big break.
But that is when cancel culture was sort of, that's where it was forged.
Well, what
if
does
you
that
will.
mean? Like-
It was forged because they would use this vernacular, cancel them.
Oh.
That means do away with them. Now, the way they canceled people back then was meaning they got canceled altogether.
What do you mean?
You know exactly what I mean. Nowadays,
Don't say that in front of Mike.
Nowadays, cancel culture means that you lose your platform, you lose your influence, you lose your voice, you lose your, whether it is your sponsors, on and on and on. Back then, it was a little more dark.
Yeah,
You lost your life. Anyway,
he said
I
it.
digress.
He said it. Okay. Well, I had no idea that was
Yeah.
the case.
That was a fun fact as it pertains to cancel culture.
Yeah.
But it's something altogether different today, and I
Yeah.
want to get into it.
Okay. Well, to get into it, I did my own form of research, not in the form of a movie. What was it called again?
New Jack City.
New Jack City.
Yeah.
I checked out a
Certainly not a Christian movie. So
little pastoral
Pastor
disclaimer.
Sammy isn't recommending that flick. I just want to make that as a disclaimer.
Family movie night coming up. Pew Research.
Ooh.
Ever heard of it?
Certainly has.
So they surveyed a little over 10,000 people. This was back in 2020. And just kind of getting the scope of, have you heard of cancel culture? What do you think? What does it mean to you? And they surveyed a pretty wide spectrum of political ideologies.
Yeah.
Meaning, you had the the more typical Republican or conservative staunch view,
Right.
more Democratic or liberal view. But the interesting thing is that what the middle ground answer and interpretation of what cancel culture actually means is holding people accountable for their comments.
Wow.
Yeah, I was interested to learn that. You had the other answers as far as censoring speech, some of the things that let's be frank, like I lean more toward a conservative bias, I guess, in the interpretation of that term.
Wouldn't have known that.
No?
I don't think our listeners would have either, and our viewers.
Yeah. There's nothing about me that says that.
I do think that the confusion around cancel culture is the inconsistency with it. Although that, whether you take a more progressive and liberal, political approach and or social approach, or you're a more conservative, sort of right-wing, old school approach, both parties and both arenas like to cancel one another. So what, from my study, actually, I thought it was by and large a more sort of progressive initiative, when in fact it's not. It's not. It's actually equal. And the data shows that, whether it's about influencers or political parties or other pundits or what have you. Everybody is looking for someone to fall off the slippery slope, say something that's egregious or exclusive or what have you. So I think that it was started, really its groundswell came from a more progressive view, but now it's tit for tat. The problem is that in one sense our culture celebrates free speech. The other problem is that cancel culture is suppressing that or then limits the voices of those that are exercising that. So yeah, I think there is merit to canceling people that are really, really egregious, a jerk, vile, ignorant towards one another. They should lose their degree of influence. And I understand why people would go, hey, you know what? I'm not listening to you anymore. But when it comes to the exchange of ideology, when it comes to debating, we have turned disagreeing into disrespect. And it's whack. And so now both parties are weaponizing cancel culture, and we've used that to sort of, it's like the last sort of pin in the grenade that we're using. And the question that I have is, now that we have given major credence to cancel culture, everybody's sort of timid from it, can we cancel culture? That's a good question, is it not, Beck?
Yeah.
Can we cancel? Can we reverse the tide of something that has become a cultural, societal norm and reverse this? Because let's play this out. Let's play this out. Who gets to sort of determine the metric or the boundaries of what should and should not be canceled? I think it's only going to ramp up to where if you say the slightest thing, we already live in a hyper-offended culture. Oh, you believe that? You say that? Yeah. I mean, I have seen this develop over the course of the last 5 years. I was just in a conversation with someone recently where I said, I have felt, one, as a preacher, so I have felt things that I used to say from the stage 5 years ago, I clutch now, or at least I mentally clutch and think through, what will this do? What's the implications therein? How could this get me canceled? On and on and on. All the more as the platform has grown bigger, the church has now grown larger, things like that. I calculate that. Not to say that I always heed to that. Actually, Becca would say, seldom do I heed to that. However,
not enough do I heed to that.
Yes, and emails will underpin that fact.
Yeah.
But the question is, where does this go? How bad does it get? And at what point do we start getting real diminishing? I would already argue that we are getting diminishing returns because it is suppressing free speech. It is.
Well, it's not only suppressing free speech. It's suppressing the free exchange and the competition of ideas.
Well said.
Not just, well, you have the freedom to be a jerk. Well, okay, but also we're looking at places of higher learning, colleges, where
Totally.
there are faculty of well-known colleges,
Absolutely.
who up to a third of them would say that they self-censor. This
100%.
is supposed to be the marketplace of ideas and where you go to be challenged in your thinking and your thought processes.
Totally. So let's get. Actually, I'm sorry.
Look at my
Finish
hand
your
in
thought.
midair.
I was getting ready to cancel you. Go ahead.
Well, no, but we're seeing that not only in places of higher learning where we need to have those ideas cross-pollinate, but also in places where you would think the most freedom and liberty is given, like in comedy. But you have comedians who are self-censoring. These are people who they're paid
Yes.
to shock us with their statements.
Absolutely.
And yet, even they would say, okay, is this crossing the line?
Yeah.
Should I not say this? Which is why, ratings on late night shows are plummeting, is because it's so milquetoast in many ways.
Yes.
So where does it get us? It gets us there. That's what we're seeing.
That's exactly right. While at the same time, I think the underbelly of it all, or what is going unrecognized, is that when you suppress somebody, or people self-censor, or people live in with this timidity of being canceled, it's not that their ideology goes away, and it's not that their perspective is reforged or changed. What happens is, and we've referenced this many a times, is that people just get pent up with anger because they don't have any outlet. The beautiful thing about free exchange, and you and I, in a controlled environment where it's understood that I'm listening to you and you're listening to me and you respect me despite my ideas and perspectives, that it allows me the freedom to let my ideas breathe. It's like a tea kettle. It lets me sing a little bit. Wee, you know how you do? So anyway,
Oh, I know.
you know how you do? Like I looked it back like, no, I don't.
She's like, I'm pretty sure I don't do that when I'm making tea, but
But if you keep that pent up and you go, your idea isn't any good here, and you don't have the liberty to express yourself here, what you're doing is you're creating a time bomb. And I think that's why the temperature of our nation, we're doing these little things that we haven't considered the implications of, and it's all breeding this vitriol that's in and among us because people don't feel that they have the liberty any longer to do A, B, or C. In this case, it's the freedom of expression. You just mentioned higher learning. Stanford, you and I talked about this recently. What was he? Was he an appeals court judge, or was he?
I'm not sure which court.
Okay, so he was an elected official, sat on the bench for what may be a circuit court judge. He was invited to Stanford to sit before their, I believe it was pre-law, but in any which case, he came to really express himself as to why he voted or, sort of landed in a place that he did in previous cases. And I think they had to do with abortion. One had to do with a matter of pedophilia and the sentence that he gave to the guy that committed the crime.
Yeah.
Well, he got there, and the whole thing was a sabotage. It was a setup. So he was never even given the opportunity to stand behind the podium and express why he did, his line of thought, on and on and on. What happened is that the dean brought him in, sort of gave the forecast to the class. This is who's coming.
Yeah.
I want you to be ready for him, filibuster him when he gets into our class. So they all come with signs. They shout him down, ridicule him. F you, F this, on and on and on. Then she gets up with a prepared speech, eviscerates this man. That meanwhile, these are students. These are students that only can aspire to sit on the bench one day and change policies or to shape culture. He's done all of his due diligence, and they treated him like trash and then told him to get out. Hey, dude, as a conservative, I'm just letting you know, in my flesh, I wanted to fly to Stanford. And I wanted to backslide for an afternoon and set the record straight. But that's what's now. Now, what happens at Stanford is happening at Berkeley and happening at many other Ivy League schools and
it's
higher
common for conservative
academia.
speakers to get booked somewhere and then not be given the chance to actually speak. Why?
Yes.
Because on that spectrum, it's not just about saying something offensive, or it's now we've gotten to the point of you simply disagree with me, you must be stopped because what they say is it's dangerous.
Yes.
Your words are dangerous. Your words are violence, actually.
It's violence.
Yeah.
It's violence.
So
even sitting before, congressional committees now, when they bring people in that are administering, whether it be, gender transition drugs, what have you, if they are using words, even in the questioning, even in talking to the doctors, the pediatricians, the what have you, and they use questions that are sort of drawing out, I have heard it on many occasions that the response is, those words are inciting violence. Yep. Those words are transphobic. Those words are on and on and on. And so we are in a really, really dangerous space. But hey, would you mind if I shift the conversation?
Sure.
Here's what I want to know, for all intents and purposes, for our listeners and viewers that are viewing us in our brand new studio with the ivy behind us.
Real.
No, it is not. It's plastic, and it keeps falling apart. Anyway, here's the question. As followers of Jesus that now are coming up through a culture that is quick to cancel, that is arguably a form of persecution, and if it were to persist, what then is our response to that? And how is it that we are to navigate these waters where it will be quick? I'm just going to, this isn't prophecy, I'm just predicting a little bit, that it will be soon to where us preaching the exclusivity of Jesus, that there is one way to heaven. He is the way, the truth, and the life. No one gets to the Father except through Christ. To preach that is a message of exclusivity. Yep. That will be deemed hateful, bigoted, narrow. It already is. Yeah. What then is our response in our aim to still reach the lost and make disciples?
I don't know. I mean, I think that there are two aspects to it, in the sense that there's the cultural aspect and then the personal aspect.
Okay.
Which would you like?
I would like the cultural.
The cultural aspect. When it comes to the cultural aspect of cancel culture, which is a mouthful, you asked, how do we reverse trend? In part, you cannot give power to the movement. In the sense that when you make a mistake, own it. But if you didn't make a mistake, don't apologize just because someone else is offended.
Right.
I was thinking about this earlier when it comes to even this podcast. We had people who were very offended and very upset by the woke episode that we did.
Yes.
And some of them sent in mean things. But here's the thing. I wasn't offended.
Amen.
Or I wasn't upset by those things. Why? Because I don't know them. They don't know me. They don't have any power over me. And so, if it were Becca and she called me all sorts of things, I'd probably cry in the corner. But I don't know. I think you can't give. Don't try to be offensive. But if you say something and it's if you are convicted and you did something wrong, own it. But at the same time, you don't need to apologize just because somebody was offended by something that you said.
Amen.
Because what we do see in culture is typically there's an outcry. You did something insensitive, so we demand restitution. We demand accountability. Back to that definition. The question is, okay, well, what's accountability in this instance?
Right.
A lot of times, like what you said, it's calling for their platform, it's calling for their job, cancel their career.
Yes.
What?
Right.
I just think that we don't listen to it. We don't give credence to that.
Absolutely.
So that's what I would say culturally, if that makes sense.
So let me jump off of that.
Okay.
And I think that answer is beautiful and right on the money, because, you know, what you don't want to do is what then the right. Let's just speak to the right. The right has picked up the same weapon and has now levied that right back at either those that would do that in Ivy League schools or the progressives that would do that towards conservatives. It cannot be that you wield the same sword, because all that is creating is polarization, the loss of dialogue, and it's not Jesus. Mm-hmm. It's not Jesus to take on whether it would be, you know, the same mentality as a Sean Hannity or you know, as, you know, certain, you know, Republican candidates. And you can't do it, because it number one, all that does is it fuels the fire. Wherein, if you are speaking truth, but the accusation is the way that truth has been spoken, that should be considered by the speaker. I think there's a lot of people right now that are speaking truth. It's the tone and the tact in which they're doing it in that is not Christ-like. It is not seasoned with grace. It is not. It is more angry at the person than the ideology. And so that falls into the enemy's trap. And so I think that we got to be culturally, when we think of this, we got to be very conscious of that, to realize, as Jesus stood over top and overlooked Jerusalem, it says that he wept because he saw them as sheep without a shepherd. There was such a compassion to them being deceived. There was such a compassion towards people being lost. And so if we fall into the trap of responding to vitriol with vitriol and needing to defend ourselves, I think that's we're only going to get caught in the same quagmire. But if you speak truth, knowing that it's not just, we didn't contrive it, mm-hmm. and we didn't manufacture it and come up with it, but we speak as heralds and representatives and ambassadors on behalf of Jesus, then you can stand firm in it and not need to apologize for it. Mm-hmm. I think there's a balance in there, because, make no mistake, ideology invokes an emotion. I'm very passionate about the message of Jesus. I'm very passionate about the truth that I wield and the fact that I get to speak it into a world full of lies. It invokes a lot of emotion in me. But when I respond to other people's emotion with then anger and or hate, I cut myself off at the knees. Mm-hmm. And so I think that we find ourselves in a really sort of a thin tightrope here, as now we're under the threat of either being canceled or persecuted for the truth that we speak. And so in that, we should know first and foremost, culturally, it's coming. Mm-hmm. So prepare yourself for it. Jesus said, they hated me, they're going to hate you. They should not hate me for being Sammy Foster. They should hate me for the truth that I herald and the exclusivity that it is. Mm-hmm. Hey, you can hate me for that, but I don't want you to hate me because I'm a jerk, because I flew out to Stanford, rip-roaring through campus, looking to set the record straight.
On a Segway.
on a scooter with a helmet. I don't want them to hate me for that. If they're going to be angry, let's make sure that it's angry for the right things. You feel me?
Yeah, no, definitely.
Okay, so now personally, and I would just say that the other day in preaching lab here at Lighthouse Church, we have a little preaching lab that we host on
We host.
We have one Tuesdays, and Boots brought the thunder the other day.
That's one way to put it.
It was great. It was fantastic. However, tell them what you preached on and sort of unpack that, because I believe that that's very pertinent to what we're talking about.
Yeah, well, from the personal aspect, it was just the idea. We were talking about persecution, so the tie-in here is when it comes to cultural canceling, we need to examine our own hearts, in the sense that my propensity to, if somebody wrongs me, if somebody upsets me, if somebody offends me,
Yeah.
I have a temptation to internally cancel them. You know what I mean? So
Yes.
if you say something and I'm like, all right, you're done. Like maybe I don't say anything, or maybe I don't do anything. I don't retaliate in response.
Totally.
But as far as I'm concerned, like, I want no further relationship with you.
Yep.
That's not who we're called to be as followers of Jesus. We're called toward reconciliation. We're called toward forgiveness. And so that just can't be our, sure there are extenuating circumstances of where boundaries and stuff like that are necessary, but our rule of thumb is not to cancel each other as Jesus followers. Our rule of thumb is grace, forgiveness,
Amen.
and restoration. So as we look at a culture that's canceling people left and right, we need to be part of the solution with just how we treat each other individually.
Well said. And we cancel one another in the church all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, pastor says something from the front. Oh, I heard he said this, yada, yada, yada. We'll lob bombs. Meanwhile, we're 7 states away. We'll cancel him. Shouldn't listen to him anymore.
Yep.
I mean, we are prone to shoot our sick.
Yeah.
And that is systemic in and among the church. So we do that to our own. How much more are we prone to do that towards those that don't even know Jesus?
Yeah.
Now, there is something extremely tempting about canceling people. Is there not?
No. Yes.
And look at me like I'm you self-righteous individual.
Yeah.
There is something in my flesh when somebody criticizes me, when somebody says something that I just want to put a red line through their name, be like, I'm done with you.
Yeah.
And so let's all be honest here. There is this proclivity to, I want to cancel you. That's why it's so loud and robust right now, is because that's in us. It's to say, you said something negative towards me, you disagree with me, you are critical of my ideology, I'm just going to redline you. We're so spring loaded towards that. And it's evident all around us. But to your point, if there is any hope of making a difference, of being the city on a hill whose light cannot be hidden, to be the salt of the earth that actually whets the palate of those that are seeking for hope and truth, our method must be different. And I am constantly reminding myself of this as I traverse really rough, hostile terrain, that we got to be prepared. That's why you said the other day that our two sort of responses to being persecuted or people threatening to cancel us is to, 1,
Retaliate,
and 2,
resent.
So good. That's it. You said evil about me, I'm bringing it right back to you. Or even if I stifle it, then I'm going to resent you in my heart.
You canceled.
Which Jesus spoke to. You made such a great point to speak to. If you were to consolidate the thing that Jesus was so passionate about so often when he spoke to the matter of a believer's representation, he was constantly going after how one is conditioned in their heart. So even if you're not saying something out loud, and yet you still hold anger and vitriol and hatred towards one in your heart, you're just a silent sleeper. Or you're just not a silent sleeper.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Or you got it suppressed. It's still in the eyes of God.
It's a sleeping giant is what you mean. Maybe.
Not really, but we'll go with it. So what then should we do?
if to your point, if we're not just being jerks, if we're being persecuted or attempted to be canceled because of the truth that we herald,
Yep.
then rejoice that you're counted worthy to suffer for the name of Jesus.
Amen.
And looking forward to the day that he comes back, he sets everything right, the great reward that we have, so that ultimately we hear, "Well done, thou good and faithful servant."
Amen. And I think that is not only beautiful, it should be at the very top of our mind when we think to speak the message of Jesus in a culture that is growing increasingly hostile towards it, to speak the message of Jesus that is exclusive in a world full of inclusivity. I think that there should be an attitude of, if it's resisted, at least I can rejoice that I remain faithful.
Mm-hmm.
And that there should be a boldness and a courage, once again, to say, we live for the audience of one. If everybody around you is liking you and affirming what you're saying, I would say you should most certainly check yourself right now to see, are you being faithful to the gospel, faithful to the scriptures? Because if they persecuted our Maker, they're going to persecute us. And yet we can still hold fast in the face of it and go, my reward doesn't come from the accolades and the affirmation of men and women.
Yeah.
My reward comes from the Maker of heaven and earth, whose truth will stand forever. Heaven and earth may pass away, but the word of the Lord will stand forever. Come on, somebody. I'm getting ready to get after it. Get me a pulpit. Michael!
We don't have
But
a
with
pulpit,
that, I digress.
but we do have a big round table for you.
Okay, well, hey, I'm all out on that subject.
Let's cancel this episode.
Episode 1 of season 3
It's in the
is in the
books.
bag.
It's in the bag. It's in the books. It's in the book bag. Get it? Got
We
it.
got an incredible season coming up.
We do.
And with some guests. There's a finale to this season. I'm just going to tip my hat. See that? To
Thank you, partner.
what's happening here in June. Details are forthcoming, but we are going to host a live session.
Session. Don't call it a session.
Oh, I'm sorry. Episode. Live episode where we're going to have, Mike, how many people do you think that we can fit in here in our new studio?
75.
75. Now, what we were thinking was our 30th episode.
He's an optimist. I never would have thought.
I love this guy.
Yeah.
Hey, because we had it limited to 30. 30th episode, 30 people. But I think we might be able to push that because I'm looking right now and I see if we did 4 or 5 rows of 10 across, maybe we're going to have a little pregame party before the episode, little dinner, little hors d'oeuvres.
Yep.
And then
I'm picturing oysters on the half shell, but probably
oysters
not.
on the half shell.
All right,
Nah.
Becca said save some details.
Oh, okay.
So we've got a lot to consider, but yeah, there's something for you to think about.
Yes.
So with that, thank you guys for listening to our very first episode of season 3. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for following us wherever you get your podcasts. Also follow us on Instagram at Simplexity Podcast.
We love you guys.
Oh, I